Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to be talking about the best books I've read over the past several years. I have been gone from BookTube for the past several years, so I just want to talk about the books I read that I loved during that span of time that I was gone. And I'm not going to be talking about any of the books I read this year because ideally at the end of this year I want to make like a best books I read this year video. So just books I read from like 2024-ish to maybe 2023-ish to 2025, the end of 2025, so that's the time span. I have a list and these were all 5-star reads for me, and I will try splitting them up into genres. And starting off with my favorite genre, fantasy, we have Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I don't consider myself a Stephen King fan, but I have read several of his books over the past several years. This one, however, I consider to be the cream of the crop. This book is about this high school kid named Charlie who gets to be on good terms with his neighbor Mr. Bowditch, and when Mr. Bowditch dies, he leaves all of his property and a bunch of other things to Charlie, and Charlie finds out that Mr. Bowditch was protecting this portal to another realm on his property. So Charlie gets to visit this alternate universe with magic and is trying to save that world while also making sure that people from the real world stay away from this magical world. I'm actually not doing a good job explaining it, but it's really good, I promise. Usually I'm kind of iffy about Narnia-esque books that take place in the real world, but the characters fall into another magical world, but I think this book does that really well. It also does a really good job incorporating all those fairy tales that you heard as a kid and never thought about again. For example, that story of the mouse that pulled the thorn out of the lion's paw, and all these fairy tales added together in here add a really good sense of whimsy, and I really love that. Also lots of Easter eggs hidden around for people who love like folk tales and fairy tales and just like children's fairy tales. 5 out of 5 stars, loved it. The next book I want to talk about is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This, I think, is his debut book, and I would go as far as to say that this is my favorite Brandon Sanderson book. The summary is a little bit convoluted, so I'm gonna try my best. There used to be this city called Elantris, and it was full of magic and wonder, but 10 years ago something happened and the city was destroyed and now it is no more. Now there is this new kingdom, I guess, called Erelon, and people here don't have magic. One of our main characters is Princess Serene, and she arrives in Erelon to marry the Prince of Erelon, Raoden. But when she arrives in Erelon, she finds out that Prince Raoden died, and now she is considered a widow, so she is kind of just thrown into court politics at this like foreign court, I guess, and she's doing her best to understand the people there. What she doesn't know, and what nobody knows, is that Prince Raoden is not dead. He has actually been struck by the same curse that the city of Elantris was struck by, and he has been exiled by his father. So Princess Serene is caught in the middle of court politics while also trying to figure out the secret of Elantris and trying to figure out what happened to Prince Raoden. Like I said, this was my favorite Sanderson book. It really doesn't follow any prominent fantasy tropes that you often see in other books. I feel like this is a very unique storyline, and I remember loving the politics in this. Also, Princess Serene is a wonderful main character. No complaints about her whatsoever. I find in fantasy books I always have some sort of an opinion about what the main character is doing, but this one I was like, yes, amazing. Keep going. And while we're still talking about Sanderson, I want to talk about the next book I really, really loved, Wind and Truth, which is the 5th book in the Stormlight Archive. Last year, in preparation for this book, I reread books 1 through 4 of the Stormlight Archive, and then I finally read this one, and it was amazing. I have a special place in my heart for the first book in the series, The Way of Kings, but this book, I would have to say, has been my favorite so far. Kind of, I still really love The Way of Kings, but this book was like next level. I don't want to talk about exactly what happens in this book because it is the 5th in the series. For my spoiler-free review, loved it very much. There were some parts of it that were kind of a little slow and kind of a little boring, but overall it was very good. The characterization was very good. One thing I really appreciated is that Brandon Sanderson stayed true to his characters instead of making them do something like completely out of character. Now, for the spoilers, Kaladin has become a herald. I literally cried in this scene. And when he finally said his oaths as a herald, instead of hearing the Stormfather say that these words are accepted, it was Syl whose voice said, "These words are accepted." This won't make any sense to anyone who hasn't read the book, but it was just such a good part of the book, so if you know, you know. Heralds are, in a way, immortal, kind of. Like, they can't die, they just go into, like, this endless sleep, and they are woken up every time the world needs them again, I guess, in a way. If in the next book Kaladin wakes up and it's been hundreds of years and everyone he's known in his, like, original human life is dead, I don't know what I don't know what I would do. But in a way, his fate makes so much sense. I am glad this is where his journey took him. Adolin, when I said that Brandon Sanderson stays true to his characterizations, Adolin is who I was specifically talking about. I fully expected Adolin to become a Radiant. But to be a Radiant, you have to take certain oaths. And from the very beginning of the series, Adolin was someone who did not like oaths very much, and I am so glad that he stuck to this ideal and didn't utter a single oath. And I love that Spren came to fight alongside him even despite this. And then Shallan was also so good in this book. We get to know a lot more about her backstory and about her mother's backstory, and I might have misunderstood, but she is the daughter of a herald. And there was implication that Shallan might take Chana's place as a herald as well, but it hasn't happened yet, so we don't know. If you are deep into the Stormlight Archive lore, or the Cosmere lore in general, you do know that there are world hoppers that show up in multiple of Brandon Sanderson's series, and in this series, Hoyd is obviously here, he's everywhere, but Kelsier from Mistborn is also here. In fact, he is kind of a villain. He is the leader of that secret society that Shallan was kind of a part of. I forget their name. And I just don't know what he's doing or why he's kind of a bad guy in this. Super excited to find out what this whole situation will turn out to be. Hopefully the next book comes out sometime within the next 10 years. I don't know. Brandon Sanderson is pretty fast, but he is taking his time with the Stormlight Archive, so we'll see. The next book I want to talk about is God Killer by Hannah Kanner. Kissen's family were killed by zealots of a fire god. Now she makes a living killing gods and enjoys it. That is until she finds a god she cannot kill, who has somehow bound himself to a young noble, and they are both on the run from unknown assassins. Joined by a disillusioned knight on a secret quest, they must travel to the ruined city of Blenraden, where the last of the wild gods reside, to each beg a favor. Pursued by demons and in the midst of a civil war, they will face a reckoning. Something is rotting at the heart of their world, and only they can be the ones to stop it. I absolutely love this book as well. 10 out of 10 characters, 10 out of 10 banter, 10 out of 10 plot, and 10 out of 10 betrayal of the worst sort. I don't really have much more to say about it. It's a very fast-paced book, so you can kind of get through it really quickly, and I listened to the audiobook as well, so I think I finished this within like a day or two. I loved all the characters in it. Kissen, the main character, and there is a younger like child, and there's a bit of like Kissen is almost kind of like a motherly figure to this kid, and that's explored really well. I really liked that dynamic. I really enjoyed it overall. The next book I want to talk about is House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Crate. This was a retelling of the Brothers Grimm fairy tale, The 12 Dancing Princesses. It was very trippy, but at the same time it was a delightful read, and I am quite surprised because I think I put this book off for several years after it came out. So when I finally got around to reading it, I was very surprised and I loved it a lot. It's about 12 sisters who live in a manor by the sea, and they are all cursed. Annalie is the main sister we follow in this, and she becomes increasingly suspicious that her sisters' deaths were not coincidence. Some of her sisters have been sneaking out every night to attend glittering balls and dancing till dawn, and Annalie isn't sure whether to try and stop them or to join them. Overall, it was very whimsical, but with like a darker twist to it, and I really enjoyed it. There was a spin-off of this book about one of the other sisters, which I also read and I also loved and also gave 5 stars to, so highly recommend this series overall. The next book I also really loved was House of the Beast by Michelle Wong. This book follows our main character Alma, who in order to save her mother sacrifices her arm to the beast, and this ceremony forever binds her to the beast, but obviously it doesn't work and she sets out on this quest of vengeance. Everyone in this book is a morally gray character, including the main character herself. There are toxic, codependent relationships involved, and overall, it was a really good read, but it was very different from other YA books of the sort because there isn't one like good hero. I feel like the main character was quite like unhinged the entire time, but I really love that. Every single character had their own very clear purpose of why they were doing what they were doing, and all the side characters weren't just there for the sake of being there. I feel like everyone had a reason for doing what they were doing, and I really liked that. I also loved the overall atmosphere of the book. Everything was very descriptive and the imagery was great. I think this was a debut novel, and that is amazing because for like a first book, I think this is like an amazing book, and I definitely will be keeping an eye out for other of Michelle Wong's books. The next book I want to talk about is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. This book takes place in a land where terrible floods sweep away entire villages, and in hopes of appeasing the sea god, every year one beautiful maiden is tossed into the sea in hopes that the sea god will find one true bride or something like that. This one year, Shim Chong, the most beautiful girl in the village, is chosen, but her beloved, June, follows her in order to save her. June is Mina's older brother, and Mina is our main character. So Mina is trying to save June, and June is trying to save Shim Chong. And basically what ends up happening is that Mina throws herself into the water instead of Shim Chong. Swept away to the spirit realm, Mina seeks out the sea god, only to find him caught in an enchanted sleep. With the help of a mysterious young man named Shin, as well as a motley crew of demons, gods, and spirits, Mina sets out to wake the sea god and bring an end to the killer storms once and for all. This was a beautiful story, like one I've never read before. Reading this book made me feel the same way I feel while watching a Ghibli movie. The imagery and the atmosphere and the tone, it was all so like cozy, I guess, in a way, and really beautiful. More than anything, I loved the character development. It was very clear in the book that the characters were forced to challenge the original beliefs that they had, and we could kind of see them go through the plot and slowly start to change their way of thinking. I would say out of everything, I loved the character arcs the most in this. 5 out of 5 stars, loved it a lot. The next book I want to talk about is Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Poronek. This is the summary. Raised in a small village near the Spirit Wood, Liska knows that magic is monstrous and its practitioners are monsters. After Liska unleashes her own powers with devastating consequences, she is caught by the demon warden of the wood, who offers her a bargain: 1 year of servitude in exchange for a wish. Whisked away to his crumbling manor, Liska soon discovers the sinister roots of their bargain, and if she wants to survive the year and return home, she must unravel her host's spool of secrets and face the ghosts of his past. So good, I started levitating. If you liked Spinning Silver or The Bear and the Nightingale, this is kind of a book similar to that. I think if you like those, you will like this one as well. It's very woodsy and foresty, and just the vibe was overall immaculate. The next book I want to talk about is The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Long. Our main character is Tao, and she is a traveling fortune teller. But one day during her travels, a reformed thief and an ex-mercenary recruit her into the search for a lost child. And soon they are joined by a baker and a magical cat. I loved this book so much. The found family is incredible. Out of all the different books I've read with the found family trope, I would say this is one of the best. I loved all of the characters. They all had their separate quirks and their separate backgrounds, and I especially loved that the main storyline wasn't centered around any sort of romance. There is romance for the side characters, but not for the main character, which I really liked. This was overall a very cozy read, and I really recommend it. It's so good. And it's just a standalone, so it's a quick read too. The next book I want to talk about is The Scarlet Alchemist by Kylie Lee Baker. This book is about our main character Zealand, who dreams of becoming a royal alchemist. When she finally has the chance to take the imperial exams and move to the capital, her reputation for being able to raise the dead follows her there. The crown prince himself seeks her out for her help because he suspects an assassination attempt coming. The more Zealand succeeds in her alchemy, the more she gets caught up in this convoluted political game, and it's only a matter of time until these political games and the truth of Zealand's past catches up to her. I don't have much to say about this book except that I really loved it. This one I also listened on audiobook, and I think I finished it within like a day. I would say it's pretty fast-paced and you kind of move through the plot pretty quickly. I loved Zealand as a main character, and I also really liked the Crown Prince. The relationships with the siblings was kind of interesting. I'm not sure if I quite liked that dynamic, but overall I did like everything. It's been quite a while since I read this book, but the ending of it is something I still remember. I was shocked. I thought I knew what was coming, but honestly, the ending of this book shocked me. And I haven't read the sequel yet, but I am really interested in seeing what happens. Personally, if I was the main character, I don't know if I would have made the decision that she did, and I don't want to talk about it because I don't know if I like fully remember it correctly, and it's also like a spoiler for the last page of the book. But overall, I really love this book. The main character has some guts, and I really appreciated reading about her as the main character. I just love when the main characters know what they're doing and are not doing stupid stuff. Next, we're gonna move on to sci-fi dystopian books, and first on the list is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. The movie is coming out, I think, next year or maybe later this year. I am gonna be first in line to watch that. This book is about Haymitch's Hunger Games, and honestly, having all this background on Haymitch is so good but so heartbreaking. There were several times where I honestly cried, and I think these games are worse than the Hunger Games, like the games themselves. You can kind of see why and how Haymitch ended up being the person that he was, and spoilers everywhere. In this book, Haymitch is very adamant about how he doesn't drink, whereas in the original Hunger Games trilogy, he's like an alcoholic, and you're like... And the worst part is that Haymitch's name wasn't even drawn. He just kind of like ended up there. The way Suzanne Collins does everything, because obviously when you start reading the book, you're like, okay, like this is Haymitch's book. They're gonna pull out his name and be like, the champions for the males is Haymitch Abernathy? What's his last name? Whatever, Haymitch. But they pull out a name, and it's a completely different name, and you're like, what the heck is going on? And then you see the way Haymitch actually ends up competing in the games. You're like, just everything about this book is so heartbreaking. And even after Haymitch becomes victor and they're parading him around the capital and putting him in a cage so people can come gawk at him, like genuinely, I have never hated anyone as much as I hated President Snow in this book. And the people who keep romanticizing President Snow because of his book, I'm inside your walls. I will be crying in the movie theater. The next book I want to talk about is Tell Me an Ending by Joe Harkin. This book takes place in a world where if something traumatic happens to you, you can go to like a memory removal facility and get that memory removed. And what happens is that across the world, thousands of people get a notification that they had a memory removed and were given the opportunity to get this memory back. And there are 4 people specifically that we follow who grapple with this decision, whether they want this memory back or not, and they can't even remember why they would have chosen to get this memory removed in the first place. It's kind of like very Black Mirror-y. It explores psychology, I guess, in a way, and grief and the way you process emotions. Also ethics, I guess. I love the way this book was formatted. We follow 4 individuals separately, but obviously they follow one overarching storyline. I loved reading about all these separate people and finding out how they were all connected at the end. Overall, this was a very interesting book and I highly recommend it. It really gets you kind of thinking, you know, like if something terrible happens, would you rather just forget it, or would you keep that memory and kind of grow from there, and what is the right thing to do in that situation? It's actually quite interesting and I really liked it. The next book I want to talk about is I Who Have Never Known Men by Stephanie Hartman. This book is about 40 women who are imprisoned in a cage underground. They are watched over by guards. They don't know how they got there or who they were before they got there. They have no notion of time and only a vague recollection of their lives before they were there. The 40th prisoner is a young girl and she becomes the key to the others' escape. And we finally see them break away from these prisoners and reach the world above ground. This book was very trippy, also disturbing, and wow, like, to be honest, I'm speechless. The ending of the book I didn't even like, but I gave this book 5 stars because it had me speechless. I don't know what to say about it, but I highly recommend it because you kind of have to read it for yourself and know, and spoiling it won't really help. I feel like you have to go through this trippy experience of following these women through this journey, and it's quite disturbing, and yeah, I don't know what to say, but honestly it was one of the best books I read over the past several years. Okay, next, getting into the contemporaries. The first book I want to talk about is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This book follows an author by the name of Juniper, and her aspiring author friend Athena passes away. And Juniper kind of steals Athena's manuscript and publishes it under her own name. And while this is problematic on its own, it's even more problematic because Athena Liu was a person of color and her work was about the unsung contributions of Chinese laborers during World War I. So after she steals this manuscript and publishes it under her own name, many people are under the false assumption that Juniper also is a person of color. And it's such an interesting book to read from June's point of view because she is the bad guy of her own story. She's doing all these things and she's actively making the decision to do all these things and make things worse, and you're just reading like, oh no, it's like watching a car crash. Like, it's just the worst, but like in a good way. It's infuriating to read this book from June's point of view because she just keeps making decisions that are worse and worse, and you think it can't get any worse, but it does. Love this book. Love R.F. Kuang in general. I'm ready to sing her praises anytime. So good. The next book I want to talk about is The Reading List by Sarah Nisha Adams. This book follows two main characters. The first is Mukesh, who is a widower. He doesn't really have much going on in his life. He tries his best to get involved with the local community and worries about his granddaughter. But other than that, it's a pretty quiet life without his wife. The other character we follow is Alicia, who works at a local library. There, she discovers this crumpled up piece of paper in the back of a book, and it's a list of books. And impulsively, she reads all the books on this list, and when Mukesh decides to go to the library, she recommends all these books to him. This was honestly such a heartwarming book, and also sad. I cried several times. I read this book last year, and I would say out of all the books I read last year, this was one of the best. Like in the top 5, I would say. The characterization is good, the storyline is good, and all the characters' different relationships with each other is good. It's heartbreaking and it's sad and it explores grief and relationships, and it's just so good. I would recommend this book to anybody and everybody. The next book I want to talk about is Butter by Asako Yuzuki. I also really love this book, as I've loved every other book on this list. This book is about a gourmet cook, Manako Kaji, who is convicted of the serial murders of lonely businessmen who she is said to have seduced with her delicious home cooking. She refuses to speak to any reporters about this, and no one really knows her side of the story. That is until journalist Rika Machida writes a letter asking for her recipe for beef stew, and she writes back. As Rika's visits with Manako unfold, she finds out that they are closer to a masterclass in food than journalistic research. This book is inspired by the real case of the convicted con woman and serial killer, the Konkatsu Killer, and is an unsettling exploration of misogyny, obsession, romance, and the transgressive pleasures of food in Japan. One thing I really loved about this book is that there were many different kinds of women in it. Like, usually in most books there's the one female main character and then that's kind of it, but this book explored the lives of several different women and why they were the way they were and their different personalities, and it kind of really highlights that the way you grow up and the kind of life you lead defines you and makes you different from everyone, and every female main character doesn't have to be the same trope, the same type of person. And I really appreciated that. And I actually did not know that this was inspired by a real case until right this moment when I read this on the summary on Goodreads. I didn't know this while I was reading the book originally, and I really loved the premise of it. It sounded fascinating and it sounded different than anything else I've read before, so highly recommend this one as well. The next book I want to talk about is Spectacular Things by Dory Stein. This also, I would say, is one of the best books I read last year. It is in the top 5 along with The Reading List. This book is about two sisters, Mia and Cricket. Mia is the older sister, and she basically kind of gave up her dreams to raise her younger sister after their mother's death. And Cricket, from a very young age, has been brought up to play soccer, and her dream from when she was little is to be like a professional soccer player. This book follows these two sisters and their life growing up and their relationships with each other in these very different roles that they have. This book was beautiful and heart-wrenching, and I cried, and it was so good. I highly recommend it. It's about sisterhood and about romance and about grief, and there's just so many good things happening in this book, and I love the ending of it as well. The next book I want to talk about is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. In a small back alley in Tokyo, there's a cafe which has been serving carefully brewed coffee for more than 100 years. But this coffee shop offers its customers a unique experience, the chance to travel back in time. The journey into the past does not come without risks. Customers must sit in a particular seat and they cannot leave the cafe. They must return to the present before the coffee gets cold. In this book, we follow 4 specific people who want to travel back to the past. There's one person who wants to confront the man who left them. There's another person who wants to receive a letter from their husband whose memory has been taken away by an early onset of Alzheimer's. There's another person who would like to see her sister for one last time. And lastly, there is another person who wants to meet the daughter they never got the chance to know. This book is very short and it's a pretty quick read. It's heartwarming and melancholic and kind of sad, I guess, but also happy. After every person is done visiting the past, they kind of find peace with the present, so that makes it happy, but it's still a loss, so it's kind of sad as well, if that makes sense. It's a very good read. The next book I want to talk about is What You're Looking For Is in the Library by Michiko Aoyama. Komachi is a librarian, and she has the unique ability to read the souls of her library guests. In this book, we also follow several different people who come to this library and have a book recommended to them. While these several different people don't really interact with each other, their lives are still connected in a way, and because we're reading the story of all of them, we can kind of tell like how they are interconnected. I loved reading about all these different people. They are from different walks of life, different careers, different ages, but all their stories had a common thread running through them. If you've read the book Miracles of the Namiya General Store, which is one of my favorite books ever, this book is kind of like that. The next book I want to talk about is The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. Our main character is Colette, and she has been hiding a horrible secret. She is immortal. Like the Cullens, she starts a life somewhere, and once people start growing suspicious, like, hey, Colette isn't aging, she packs up and leaves and starts a life somewhere else. In this book, she is a lonely artist running an elite fine arts school for children in upstate New York. But her life is suddenly upended by the arrival of a gifted child from a troubled home, the return of a stalking presence from her past, and her own mysteriously growing hunger for blood. I'll be honest, I picked this book up knowing nothing about it only because the cover looked really pretty to me. I think this book captures the concept of immortality really well, especially when said immortality is inflicted upon a person who didn't want to be living in the first place. Colette becomes immortal after her family's death, so she really struggles with the fact that she's the only one living. If the angle changed, it's because my phone died and I had to reset up everything, and for a second I was very afraid that I had lost all my yapping from before. Thankfully I didn't. Anyways, getting back into it, I read a lot of reviews on Goodreads that say Colette squandered her immortality by being depressed, which insane opinion to have. I don't think so at all. I found her journey to be quite understandable. In a way, the story is just her beginning, and by the end of the book, she's finally coming to terms with her immortality and starting to find peace with who she is. She has reconnected with her grandfather, who's the one who turned her immortal in the first place, so she's finally kind of forgiving him for that. I feel like the enjoying her immortality part will come after this book. Right now, we are in the before, and I really appreciate being able to read the before. And this is gonna be a spoiler, so skip if you don't want to hear, but like I mentioned in the summary, her life was upended by the arrival of this gifted child, and by the end of the book, she has adopted him and also turned him immortal. Her eventual motherhood is foreshadowed throughout this book, so this was not surprising to me at all. It was kind of like a given ending. Lots of people were bashing this book online because women don't need to be mothers to find fulfillment and blah blah blah. But that's all she's ever wanted? Like, did you read the book? All the children she's ever come across in her life have had a profound impact on her. So when she finally finds Leo and is in the position to adopt him, it's like, finally, you know? Like, and it was so beautiful to read about. I would do anything for an epilogue about her and Leo living a life together, but just this book by itself is so beautiful and full, and I highly recommend it as well. The next book I want to talk about is Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz. Hazel is a lady who wants to be a surgeon more than she wants to marry. Jack is a resurrection man who is trying to survive in a city where it is too easy to die. Hazel, because she is a woman, is not allowed to attend lectures or go to school to become a surgeon. So without lectures, Hazel will need more than just her books. She'll need bodies to study and corpses to dissect. Luckily, she now has a new acquaintance, Jack, who digs them up for a living. But Jack has his own problems. Strange men have been skulking around cemeteries, and friends are disappearing off the streets. Hazel and Jack work together to uncover the secrets buried not just in unmarked graves, but also in the very heart of Edinburgh. I absolutely loved Hazel as a main character. She had guts, she was smart, and I couldn't help but root for her throughout this book. The vibe of this is like a historical gothic fantasy with some paranormal, I think. It's very interesting. I highly recommend it. I don't really have much else to say on it other than that. The next book I want to talk about is The Women by Kristen Hanna. Our main character is Frankie, who becomes an army nurse during the Vietnam War. This was such a powerful read. A lot of this book actually takes place post-war after Frankie has already returned home, and I wasn't expecting that. And while I know that a fictional book is not a good source on what actually happened historically, the political atmosphere at the time and its impact on veterans was also eye-opening to read about. Also by Kristen Hanna, I read The Nightingale, and this was another powerful read. This book follows two sisters during World War II. There is Vianne and her young daughter who are kind of forced to host a German soldier in their home. And then there's Vianne's younger sister, Isabel, who has joined the resistance against the Nazi. Definitely cried reading this. Kristen Hanna does not miss. And last but not least, I have two more books left to talk about, and they still kind of fall under contemporary. Actually, no, I just talked about a bunch of historical fiction. Anyways, these two are romance. The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Florence is a ghostwriter, but after a really bad breakup, she no longer believes in love and is having a really hard time ghostwriting love stories. When her new editor, a too handsome mountain of a man, won't give her an extension on her book, she prepares to kiss her career goodbye. But then she has to return home to deal with a death in the family, and while she's there, she finds a ghost standing in the funeral parlor. The ghost of her new editor. So I would say it's a contemporary romance, but there is paranormal activity going on because there are ghosts. To be honest with you, I kind of remember the vibe of this book. I remember what happened, but I can't explain in words, and I went to look at my Goodreads review for context, and this is all I found. Not helpful whatsoever. However, I do remember really loving this. I listened to the audiobook and I went through it in a couple days, so I really loved it. Trust me on this. I know I don't have much to go off of here, but I did really love this book. And finally, the last book I want to talk about is The Good Part by Sophie Cousins. This book follows a girl named Lucy. She's 26 and she's kind of tired of having to figure out her life. So she wishes one night that her life would just skip to the good part. She wakes up next morning, married, with a kid, and she is like 40. So now her life has skipped to the good part, but now she's regretting the fact that she has missed out on all these years. Missed out on meeting, I guess, the love of her life, the birth of her child, and all these things. So now she wants to really go back. I love this book, and I only picked it up because I was the same age as the main character at the time. And oftentimes I myself am like, man, let's just skip to the good part. So I found the premise to be a really fun one, and I was really interested in seeing what would happen. This book was fun, funny, had a lighthearted atmosphere, but it still managed to address serious topics like loss and grief. The main character's inner monologue was so good. It was so funny. I really loved it. There are obviously some things I wish she would have done differently, but overall, I don't have many complaints about the main character. And this book is told in first person, which I don't usually like, but this book wasn't too bad. I didn't mind that it was in first person. The only thing that I would say is missing from this book is a bit of an epilogue because, okay, spoilers, what happens is that she finds a way back and she loses her memories of having time traveled in the first place. So now she must, live her life the right way up to where she gets to the good part. So I feel like I would like to have read an epilogue where she suddenly gets back her memories of having time traveled, and I feel like that would really bring it full circle, but other than that, no complaints whatsoever. Those are all the books that I want to talk about today. I have been sitting here talking for the last 2 hours, so I'm glad to be done. Lots of editing in my future. I hope you got some good book recommendations out of this, and if you have read any of these books, please let me know what you thought about them. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope your day is as wonderful as you are.